Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
The pandemic situation has taken a much more severe turn. Now it looks like most big cities in India have positivity in double digits. Some, say Delhi for example, which has gone into a lockdown today, it's called a curfew this time, is now already at 30%. That means 1 in 3 out of the people who go for testing are turning out positive. In that situation, when what is needed is national unity, a very sharp but interesting and important argument is broken out between our former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh and our serving Health Minister, that is Dr. Harshvardhan. Dr. Harshvardhan obviously speaking on behalf of the Prime Minister because he is responding to the letter that Dr. Manmohan Singh wrote to the Prime Minister as ex-Prime Minister. Now, we will talk about that, but as we start or before we start, to get the perspective, please look at this graphic on the screen. Please take it in, absorb it carefully. Now, when you see this graphic, something very interesting comes up. You might think for a moment, is it that my city's or my country's coronavirus infection graphic has been put upside down because you are seeing all those graphs going up, in fact, like this. But this is one graph which is going down. One day it goes up a little bit and then it is sort of stalling and then down and down and down. It is not an inverted graphic. It's a true graphic. It is a graphic of the last 10-12 days vaccination figures. If you look at this graphic, you can see that over this period, that is the immediate past week or 10 days, India's vaccination numbers are actually declining. They first stalled, then one day, the second day of the Tika Utsav, I think, or third day, it went up and once again came down to about 3 million and then they have fallen, and then yesterday, that is on Sunday, April the 17th, they hit the bottom. They hit the bottom of just over 12 lakh 30,000 vaccinations. That's very, very disappointing. This is the lowest number in a long time. Now, this can be due to many reasons, including the fact that today hospitals are very busy looking after patients. They are so caught up looking after patients, they don't have the staff to carry out vaccinations. It's also true that many people are scared of going for vaccinations now because they think they might catch the virus in the hospital, but also because we know now that there is a shortage of vaccines. That the government, there was one official in the ICMR who's key to Indian Council of Medical Research, who is key to the vaccine rollout, and he had once said, in fact, on the print, that we are capable of rolling out or administering 7 million vaccines a day. The highest we've done so far is about 4.2 million or so, but that also in 2 or 3 days in more than 3 months now. Remember, we started the national vaccination drive on 16th of April on an auspicious day formally, and yet we are not reaching even half of that number on an average, and this number is now declining. That is the most worrying thing. At a time when India should have been progressively increasing its vaccination numbers, our vaccination numbers are declining. Why that is happening, it's for the minister to answer, for the health authorities to answer. We can only give you an educated, not guess, but an educated analysis, which is what we are giving, and I've given you the 4 reasons why it may be going down, but definitely there is a shortage of vaccines, and it is today that we have information that government has decided to give what might be called supplier's credit, which means advance payments of the vaccines they will buy from the 2 manufacturers in India. Now, this will still take time for them to ramp up production, etc. We are hoping that this happens faster, but we are also hoping that vaccine delivery once again gathers pace, because see, around the world, and I will come to it in conclusion, around the world, countries have faced a big second wave around the same time that the new vaccines were coming in. And I'll tell you in conclusion how they've handled it and the difference and what India needs to do. Now, these 2 arguments, first of all, Dr. Manmohan Singh, if I may say so, first served the ball. he threw the ball in Mr. Modi's court. It was a hard serve. It was a hard serve, and he raised 5 questions. Hard stuff delivered in a very soft spoken style. That is his hallmark. And I must say, it was a dignified letter, and it was not taunting the government or calling the government names. It said, it gave 5 specific suggestions. Now, this is political, this is politics. This was made public. This was not an advice given in private or confidentially. This was given in public. So, the 5 things that he suggested. It's a short letter. I will be sharing both the letters with you. On the screen, you will see the PDFs on the screen, and with the description, I will also give you the text copies of both from the print.in, because we published both in our series, the print uncut. So, his 5 suggestions, let me quickly read them out to you. One, that please make it public. Please disclose what are the firm orders for vaccinations that you've placed now so far for the next 6 months. This is so that there is predictability, and once the country knows how many you've ordered, the country should also know what's your target for vaccinations over the next 6 months. So we know, the country knows that you are in control or what to expect. That is his suggestion number 1. Suggestion number 2, how will this be distributed has to be fine tuned, because how will this be distributed state wise? The states have to know, they should have some predictability so they can plan. In fact, he suggests in detail as you read it that you should give most of these away to the states on a predictable, transparent basis, maybe on population basis, maybe on the basis of urban population, maybe on the basis of which state has how much spread of the virus. On that basis, each state should be allocated a certain percentage of these vaccinations. 10% of these vaccines, he says, the government, central government can keep in reserve for emergency situations or outbreaks, etc., that might happen someplace. It's very much like, since in this country right now, everybody is a COVID expert and a vaccinologist and a immunologist and a virologist, like everybody is a cricket coach, everybody also now pretends to be a military expert. So, in the military terms, it will be like you send your forces out to fight in various sectors, but keep a headquarters reserve. So, this 10% can be kept as the vaccine equivalent or public health equivalent of the headquarters reserve. Rest can be given out to the states, distributed among the states to be deployed to fight. That's his next suggestion. Then he says that number 3, states should be given flexibility to define categories to which this will be administered. So, to say that it's one thing to say that you've given the states so many vaccines, but then if you insist it's only 45 plus or none else, then you have actually devolved very little to the states. This is my analysis. So, let the states within these parameters have some leeway. Some state might want to give it to restaurant workers, bank employees, teachers most important, and hopefully, if you ask me from my parochial point of view, journalists, because I have young reporters across the country. You see their faces, bylines every day, and I feel rotten that we can't get them vaccinated. This is the simplest thing. You see in the Western media everywhere, young journalists go and cover wars, but they take a lot of risk walking into snipers' alleys, but at least they have the best possible protection. They have their bulletproof vests, they have the helmets, they have all that. But our reporters are today and photographers are going out without helmets and without bulletproof vests when those are available. So, states also might see that in each one's specific situation, there are some categories which might need the vaccines even though they may not be 45 yet. So, that is his third suggestion. His fourth suggestion is that largest vaccine producers in the world are in India, and he says that various governments over time have followed policies which have led to India becoming the, my word, pharmacy capital of the world or vaccine capital of the world. So, India has the largest vaccine producers. So, number 1, India should invoke the compulsory licensing provisions. Compulsory licensing provision means you can actually dismantle or you can deny the patent rights of manufacturers elsewhere. So, any company in India can be manufacturing vaccines. And he mentions that this is exactly what was done with HIV AIDS drugs. Remember when antiretroviral treatments came for HIV AIDS drugs, these were very expensive. And the immediate fear was that these are so expensive that those parts of the world where most number of human beings are suffering from HIV AIDS, that is mostly Africa at that point, they will not be able to afford this. So this was challenged. That is when compulsory licensing provisions were invoked, and a lot of Indian companies, including and especially Cipla and many others, started manufacturing these drugs at a small fraction of the price at which pharma multinationals were selling it. And that's how Africa was saved. So if you go to Africa or if you talk to African leaders, they will tell you with gratitude and with joy how it was India's generic pharma that saved Africa from the scourge of AIDS. Otherwise, God knows where would we have been by now, or where would Africa have been by now. So his fifth suggestion is that any vaccine that has been cleared anywhere in the world, particularly by regulators that India recognizes, those vaccines should be allowed to come to India, should be allowed to be imported without needing bridging trials or any other trials, and conditional clearances can be given so these trials can carry on while the vaccines are being administered, and the manufacturers have been told or importers have been told that this is conditional to your trials turning out right. These are the 5 suggestions. And then, like a sting in the tail, in his last para, besides listing these 5 conditions, he also mentions like a word of advice, but this word of advice is also an admonition delivered very gently, but nobody can miss it. And so Dr. Harshvardhan and the government also has read it as an admonition, which it is. So he says in his conclusion that please do not get fixated is not his word, he's too gentle and too diplomatic to use such a word, that's my word. That government should get not over fixated or overly focused on absolute numbers. That is saying 10 crores, 12 crores, 13 crores, but they should look at percentages. What that means is India has a large population, and it goes on to say the letter that a very small percentage of our population has been vaccinated. Now, this is something that we keep saying to you all the time, that percentages are percentages, absolutes are absolutes. Compare absolutes with absolutes, percentages with percentages. But before I go further, let me come to the reply that Dr. Harshvardhan has written on the Prime Minister's behalf. So it's a politely packaged reply, and it's quite a tough reply. He says, for example, to begin with, he says that India has been the first country to cross the 10 crore, 11 crore, 12 crore threshold for total vaccination. Now you know where he is heading, because Dr. Manmohan Singh said in his letter, don't get fixated on absolute numbers. So Dr. Harshvardhan, in his next point after saying this, says that look, you might say that you are right to say that we should not get overly focused on absolute numbers, but then tell your people also in your party to also follow the same approach. So when they're talking absolute numbers of cases, of case positivity, test positivity, fatality rate, then they should talk percentage averages or total number of cases, total number of active cases. Then they can't say India has the highest number or the second highest number. Then they should relate that to India's population and take percentages. So once again, he's saying compare percentages with percentages, absolutes with absolutes, or maybe in Indian terms I could say Indian equivalent of comparing apples with oranges also, though we produce both, but it's the summer season. So it's a bit like don't compare mangoes with bananas, because absolutes are absolutes, percentages are percentages. So he's making that point, but once again, he's not telling you what percentage of Indians have been vaccinated. He just tells you that in absolute numbers, we are ahead of the world. So he's also cherry picked what suits him. Next point he makes is that your own party does not seem to believe in vaccines. Now, there is some truth to that, in the sense that many members of his party and many others in the opposition have expressed skepticism about these vaccines, particularly about Covaxin, which is the Indian-made Bharat Biotech ICMR vaccine. Now, skepticism also comes from the fact that for that vaccine, phase 3 results are yet to come in. You can also turn around and say that for the two vaccines that the Chinese are administering to their population and that they are exporting to their friendly countries, countries that will accept that vaccine, that is Sinovac and Sinopharm, I think, those also have not had their phase 3 results verified, and those vaccines follow the same route as the Covaxin, which is an attenuated virus. Take a regular virus, coronavirus, COVID-19 virus, kill it, put it in a bath of alum, fitkari as we say in Hindi, and inject it in a human body, hoping that the human body will produce antibodies against it. And he goes on to say that your party is responsible, that is Congress party is responsible for below par numbers on vaccination drives, because he implies that it's the criticism of the vaccines, especially he names the indigenously produced vaccines. So vaccine nationalism also comes in here. And it is true that, say, the Chief Minister of Chhattisgarh, some other Chief Ministers have expressed skepticism about this vaccine, saying that they would prefer Covishield instead because it's internationally proven. And he says that has led to many senior citizens and many frontline workers in the early rounds not going for vaccination. He also tells Dr. Manmohan Singh that you are misinformed or your information is outdated, because while you've asked us to open imports, we have done so a week earlier. There is a catch there that I'll come to in a couple of minutes. And next, that we have already funded very generously the Indian vaccine manufacturers. So what are you talking about? This is yesterday's news. So tell your party to give him better news. Now, there are many things on which Dr. Manmohan Singh and the Congress party obviously will disagree, although this is much more Dr. Manmohan Singh questioning the Modi government. If the Congress party had issued the statement, it's the same statement. Frankly, even if one of the Gandhis had issued the same statement, it would not have had the same response publicly, because publicly there's been a big response to this, but also this would not have had the same sharp reaction as this has got, because Dr. Manmohan Singh, his voice still carries weight and it's taken seriously. We know it also because we are in the digital domain. We know that everything he says, even if it's a very gentle speech, it gets read or heard a great deal. So he's kept that residual respect, and that is why you've seen this sharp reaction. But there's one thing that Dr. Harshvardhan says, which I suspect Dr. Manmohan Singh will agree with, but only secretly. He will never admit it. But I can tell you, and you can see why Dr. Harshvardhan is right. He says, taunting Dr. Singh, that I don't believe that your party believes in you, that your party doesn't seem to share your view. If you ask me, if his party had shared his view, if the Congress party had shared Manmohan Singh's view on the economy, industry, foreign policy, strategic policy, environment, on any of those things from 2009 onwards, they would not have ended up with 40 odd seats in 2014 elections. They may have still lost the election, but would not have gone to two figures. But anyway, that's in the past and that is speculation. Now, as I conclude this, there are two more things that I need to mention on the larger COVID situation. Number one, there is a problem with vaccine supplies, problem with vaccine raw material supplies, because vaccines need bags, filters, a lot of very high-tech stuff which every country doesn't produce. So Serum Institute of India boss Adar Poonawalla, he actually wrote a tweet to President of America Joe Biden saying, please lift the ban on these exports, because if you don't do so, then our vaccine production will suffer, and if our vaccine production suffers, all of the world will suffer, not just India. And if you want to understand the reality, please read an article I'll share with you in the description. This is an article by Natasha Loder, who's the Economist's health policy editor, and she tells you that these vaccines now are part of very complex global supply chains, and no one country can produce a vaccine all by itself. Pfizer, for example, she quotes the Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin as saying that the Pfizer vaccine, which is now the Mercedes of Lamborghini, Lamborghini is more in fashion these days, Lamborghini of vaccines, COVID vaccines all over the world, it has 280 components. These come from 86 suppliers from 19 countries. Now, if you have that situation, you cannot have one country with a blanket ban on exports, particularly America, which is today awash with vaccines. In fact, the expression she's used is drowning in vaccines, excess vaccines. America has so many vaccines now that it doesn't suit America to slow down the vaccination drive elsewhere, because everybody has a stake, a common stake in what's going on. So read this article to understand this problem. So I do expect this problem to be resolved, and if it doesn't get resolved, this is a fit case for Prime Minister Narendra Modi to pick up the phone and speak to his strategic partner Joe Biden and say, look, if you are partners and if you also want the Quad to use vaccine diplomacy, then the first thing you must do is not to deny these crucial raw materials or crucial things for us, so we can start ramping up our vaccine production instead of having to slow it down. And while we are on a very serious topic, I can't resist the temptation of making a passing mention of another thing. Now, Minister Piyush Goyal has drawn quite a bit of response, most of it critical, some of it mocking. Memes have come out to his statement, to his asking the states to also watch the need for oxygen on demand side, saying that states should also make sure that the demand for oxygen does not go up so much. Now, obviously people are saying, oh, now government will also tell us how much to breathe, how much oxygen to take. So let me ask you a question. I told you it's not a fully serious point, but question, why do we say daylight robbery? I am subjected to daylight robbery. This comes from the reign of William III in 17th, 18th century. That was also around time, the century that when Britain was caught in fighting Napoleonic wars. So there was a lot of money being spent on those wars, and the government needed to raise as much resources as possible from anywhere. So increasingly innovative ways were found, creative ways were found to tax people. So one of those taxes was that any house that had more than 6 windows beyond a certain size had to pay tax. So as a result, people started closing up their windows with bricks and things to save on that tax. So as they closed up their windows, daylight stopped coming into their house. That's why the expression daylight robbery. It means something very unfair. It means an extortionist tax or something extortionist usually done by a government. Daylight robbery doesn't mean that a thief came into your house in daytime and picked up a couple of things and your laptop and ran away.